came on a Tuesday morning, while I was sitting in my car outside the pharmacy, waiting for my prescription to be ready. I had been waiting for a lot of things lately. Waiting for the grief to get quieter, waiting for my appetite to come back, waiting for some version of normal that never quite showed up. My wife Carol had passed 8 months earlier. Pancreatic cancer. 11 weeks from diagnosis to the end. The doctors said it was fast. I suppose they meant that as something kind. I almost didn't answer when I saw the name on the screen. It was Raymond, the contractor I had hired 3 weeks ago to clear out and renovate the storage unit Carol had rented for the last 6 years of her life. She had used it as a kind of overflow office filing cabinets, old business records, equipment from the consulting firm she ran before she got sick. I had been putting off dealing with it for months, because walking into anything that still smelled like her felt like something I wasn't ready for. But the lease renewal was coming up, and my son Marcus had finally convinced me that it was time. I answered the phone. Raymond's voice was different from the usual calls about tile samples or electrical work. He was steady, but careful, the way a person speaks when they're trying not to alarm you before they have to. "Mr. Hale," he said, "we found something inside the unit, behind the east wall. I need you to come and see it in person, but I want to ask you something first." He paused. "Do you have a son you trust?" I told him I had 2. He said, "Bring them both." I called Marcus first. He was 41, lived 20 minutes from me, worked in insurance. Steady, practical, the kind of man who showed up when you needed him and didn't make a production of it. He answered on the second ring and said he'd be there. Then I called my other son. Brendan was 38. He lived in the same city but might as well have been in another country. We had not spoken in a meaningful way in almost 2 years. The last real conversation we had was at Carol's funeral, and even that had been brief and careful, like 2 people navigating around something broken on the floor. He answered. I told him I needed him to come to the storage facility. He asked why. I said I wasn't sure yet, but that it mattered. There was a long silence. Then he said he would come. I sat in my car for a moment after I hung up. The prescription could wait. The storage facility was on the east side of town, a low concrete complex with orange rolling doors and a chain-link fence around the perimeter. Carol had chosen it because it was close to the office of one of her oldest clients, a logistics company she had worked with for nearly a decade. I had only been inside her unit twice, both times years ago when I had helped her carry boxes. Raymond met me in the parking lot. He was a big man, mid-50s, with calloused hands and a way of looking at you that suggested he had seen a great deal in his life and was not easily rattled. He was rattled now, not visibly, but I could tell. Marcus arrived 2 minutes after me. Brendan pulled in 5 minutes after that, parking at the far end of the lot, walking toward us with his hands in his jacket pockets and his eyes on the ground. We didn't embrace. We nodded at each other. It was the best we could do. Raymond walked us inside without a lot of preamble. He said his crew had been removing the drywall on the east side of the unit, which had shown moisture damage from a slow leak in the building's plumbing. When they pulled the panel away, they found a hollow space behind it, about 4 feet wide, 2 feet deep, deliberately framed out and sealed. He stopped at the entrance to the unit and looked at me. "Your wife built this herself," he said, "or had it built. It wasn't on any original schematic for the unit. Someone added it after the fact, and it was done well enough that nobody would have found it without pulling the wall." Inside, the hidden space was still open. Raymond's crew had left it exactly as they found it, which I appreciated without having the words to say so at that moment. Inside the hollow were 3 things: a fireproof lockbox, gray metal, with a combination dial, a sealed envelope with my name on it in Carol's handwriting, and a legal accordion folder, the expandable kind with the elastic cord stuffed full. My hands were shaking when I picked up the envelope. I recognized the way she wrote the letter H in my last name. She always made it slightly taller than the other letters. I did not open it there. I put it in my jacket pocket and looked at the other materials. Marcus helped me carry the box and folder to the small folding table Raymond had set up near the unit entrance. Brendan stood a few feet away, arms crossed, not looking at anything in particular. I noticed that. I noticed it the way you notice a sound that stops suddenly. The combination to the lockbox was our wedding anniversary. I knew it would be. Carol was sentimental in practical ways. She believed in hiding things in plain sight, in plain memory. The lock clicked open on the first try. Inside was a single USB drive, a small notebook with a burgundy cover, and a folded piece of paper with a handwritten list of names, dates, and dollar amounts. The numbers on that list were not small. I looked at the total at the bottom of the page. Then I looked at it again. I sat down in the folding chair Raymond had brought in without being asked, and I looked at it a third time. The total was $438,000. Below the number, in Carol's careful handwriting, were 4 words. This belongs to you. I need to go back a few years to explain what those numbers meant to me. Carol and I had built a comfortable life together over 4 decades. Nothing extravagant, we were both careful with money, paid off our house, put the boys through college, saved steadily. When she launched her consulting firm 12 years ago, it grew faster than either of us expected. She was good at what she did. Clients trusted her. She had a reputation for being the person who found the thing everyone else had missed. 6 years ago, that reputation took a hit. A client filed a complaint alleging that Carol had mismanaged funds tied to a project she was overseeing. The amounts were significant. The allegation was that money meant for subcontractors had been redirected. Carol denied everything and fought it with everything she had. But the process was long, expensive, and brutal. We spent close to $80,000 in legal fees. Her firm never fully recovered. She took on a business partner to stabilize things. And for a while that helped, but the shadow of the complaint followed her. She never told me who she believed was behind it. She said she needed to be certain before she said anything. I respected that. Carol was not a person who accused without evidence. I never pushed. Now I was sitting in a storage unit staring at evidence. The accordion folder contained printed emails, bank transfer records, contract documents, and something I had not expected, a series of screenshots from a messaging application, printed in color, with timestamps. The messages were between 2 people. One of them I did not recognize. The other had a contact name I knew. It was my son Brendan's nickname, the one Carol had given him when he was 7 years old, after he spent an entire summer insisting everyone call him by the name of a cartoon character he loved. The name had stuck for years. Only family used it. Only Carol would have known to label the contact that way. I read the first message. Then I kept reading. My hands were very still by the time I finished. I don't know why I remember that. The stillness of my own hands. The messages documented, in Brendan's own words, a plan he had developed with a former associate of Carol's firm to fabricate the billing irregularities that led to the complaint against her. The motive was not complicated. Brendan had borrowed a significant amount of money from Carol's business account, money she had lent him informally, without documentation, because he was her son, and she trusted him. When she began tightening the firm's finances and asked him to begin repayment, he had instead worked to discredit her before she could formalize the debt or pursue it. He had not just borrowed from her. He had burned her down to cover the borrowing. I did not look at Brendan immediately. I read through the documents slowly, in order. Carol had organized everything chronologically, which was so like her that it made my chest ache in a way that was separate from everything else I was feeling. She had known. For how long, I wasn't sure, but she had known, and she had gathered every piece of it carefully, quietly, without telling me. Without confronting Brendan, without going to the authorities. She had built a case the way she built everything methodically, completely, without leaving gaps. And then she had gotten sick. I finally understood why she had not told me while she was alive. If she had told me, I would have acted. I would have confronted Brendan immediately, loudly, in the way of a man who has just learned something that breaks something permanent inside him. And the confrontation would have scattered the evidence. Brendan would have had time to deny, delete, disappear information. The case Carol had built would have collapsed into a family argument, which is easy to dismiss. She had loved me enough to know that I would have ruined it. So she had sealed it in a wall and left me a letter. I opened the envelope then. The letter was 4 pages, handwritten on her good stationery, the cream-colored paper she kept in the top drawer of her desk at home. She started by telling me she loved me, which I knew, but which still took a moment to get past. Then she told me everything, the full timeline, the names of the 2 attorneys she had quietly consulted, the name of the forensic accountant who had reviewed the bank records and prepared a notarized summary, which was included in the accordion folder, the name of the detective she had hired through one of her trusted clients, whose firm specialized in financial fraud cases. She told me that the USB drive contained recorded phone conversations. She had purchased a call recording application and used it for 8 months, documenting conversations with Brendan in which he made statements that corroborated the documentary evidence. She told me the approximate value of what had been taken from her firm, and from us, over 3 years. She told me the name of the attorney I should call first. And then, at the end of the letter, she wrote something that I have read probably 40 times since that day. I am not going to reproduce all of it here, but she ended it this way. She said she hadn't told me while she was alive because she needed me to grieve her cleanly, without this weight, for at least a little while. She said she was sorry she couldn't give me longer. She said she knew I would handle it when I was ready, because I had always handled things when I was ready, even when I took my time getting there. She said she trusted me. I folded the letter and put it back in the envelope. I pressed it flat against my chest for a moment, which is not something I would ordinarily do in front of other people. I did it anyway. Marcus had been reading over my shoulder for the last several minutes. With my permission, I heard him exhale slowly. He put his hand on my shoulder and didn't say anything, which was the right thing. Brendan had moved closer while I was reading. He had seen the accordion folder open. He had seen the name of the messaging app on the printed screenshots, even if he hadn't been close enough to read the content. I could tell from the way he was standing. He was very still, not the same kind of stillness as my hands. I looked at my younger son. He looked back at me. I am 64 years old. I have made a significant number of mistakes in my life, and I have watched people I cared about make mistakes of their own, and I have learned that the look on a person's face when they understand they've been found out is different from every other expression they're capable of making. It's not guilt, exactly, and it's not fear, exactly. It's something that happens when those two things arrive at the same moment and neither one knows where to go. That was the look on Brendan's face. I didn't say anything dramatic. I had not planned what to say, and I found that I didn't need to. I picked up the accordion folder and the lockbox and the USB drive, and I told Raymond I would be in touch about the rest of the renovation work. I thanked him for calling me the way he did, for handling things the way he did. He said, "I've got daughters. I figured someone ought to know." I told him that was exactly right. I called the attorney Carol had recommended that same afternoon from Marcus's kitchen table, with Marcus sitting across from me and a cup of coffee I didn't drink going cold between my hands. The attorney had already heard from Carol. She had reached out to him over a year before she died and provided him with a copy of the full file, instructing him to wait until I made contact. He had been waiting. He was calm and methodical and said we had a strong case. The forensic accountant's report was thorough. The recorded calls were legally obtained in a jurisdiction where single-party consent applied. The documentary evidence was organized in a way that would make the process significantly cleaner than most fraud cases he handled. He said it would take time. I said I understood time. Brendan called me that evening. I let it go to voicemail. He called again. I let it go again. The third time I answered. He didn't start with a denial. I'll give him that. He started with an apology, which surprised me, and which I did not trust, but which I let him finish. He said he had made a terrible mistake. He said he had been in a desperate financial situation and had convinced himself it was temporary, that he would find a way to fix it before anyone noticed that it had gotten out of control. He said he had not meant for it to go as far as it did. I listened to all of it. Then I told him that his mother had spent the last 2 years of her life quietly documenting what he had done instead of spending that time and energy on other things. I told him that she had died with this knowledge inside her, carrying it alone, because she loved me enough not to hand me something she knew would consume me before she could make sure it was handled properly. I told him I had handed everything to an attorney. He was quiet for a long time. Then he asked if there was anything he could do. I said, "You could have not done it." I ended the call. The legal process took 14 months. Brendan's business partner in the scheme, a former associate of Carol's named Gerald, who had seen an opportunity when the firm's finances became complicated, attempted to minimize his role and negotiate a reduced settlement. The attorney handled it. Marcus came to every meeting he was available for. I went to all of them. In the end, the civil judgment required repayment of the full fraudulent amount, plus interest, plus the legal fees Carol and I had paid during the original complaint investigation. A portion of Gerald's professional licenses were revoked. Brendan avoided criminal prosecution because his attorney negotiated a cooperation agreement in exchange for his full testimony against Gerald, who bore the greater financial liability. I do not know how I feel about that outcome. I have turned it over in my mind many times. Carol's attorney told me it was the practical result, the one that maximized recovery and minimized the years this would otherwise consume. I believe him. I also believe that practical and right are not always the same thing, and I have had to make peace with the distance between them. What I know is that the money recovered went into an account I set up in Carol's name, attached to a small scholarship fund at the college where she did her undergraduate degree. She studied business there on a partial grant because her family didn't have money for tuition, and she never forgot that. It seemed like the right place for it to go. She would have agreed, I think. Marcus and I have dinner on Sunday evenings now. We didn't used to do that. It started in the months after the storage unit. After all of it, when we both needed somewhere to put the parts of the week that were too heavy to carry alone. His wife makes a good pot roast. I bring something from the bakery Carol liked. We don't always talk about important things. Sometimes we talk about football, or something one of his kids did that week, or something I read that made me think of her. It is a quiet thing. It is enough. I have not spoken to Brendan since the legal process concluded. He sent a letter. I read it. I put it in the same fireproof box where I keep Carol's letter, not because I have forgiven him, but because I have not decided yet what I am going to do with the things I cannot resolve, and the box seemed like a reasonable place to keep them in the meantime. I still drive past the storage facility sometimes on my way to other places. The unit is empty now, cleaned out, re-drywalled, re-rented to someone else. There is nothing left there that belongs to us. But I think about the wall. About Carol standing in that unit, measuring, planning, building a space inside the structure of an ordinary place to hold something that needed to outlast her. I think about the care that took, the patience, the particular kind of love that looks like practicality from the outside but is something else entirely underneath. She was always the one who thought ahead. She was always the one who made sure things were handled. I just had to be ready to open the envelope. I think I finally am.